Good afternoon and welcome to this week's episode of Safety Culture Solutions, sponsored by Safety Culture Strategies. I'm Mike Kinney, your podcast host. This podcast is committed to providing our viewers with insight regarding tools, techniques, and processes to assist any organization with enhancing their safety culture. In addition, we will routinely have featured guests, including industry leaders, authors, and business owners, offering their perspective on a series of safety culture topics. You can reach us via the Safety Culture Strategies Facebook page, our website, www.scstrat.com, or via email at mike@scstrat.com. Without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest, Dr. Christine Lee, President of Lemma Technical Services. With more than 30 years' experience in nuclear cleanup and remediation work, decommissioning, demolition, and nuclear site closure projects on 2 continents, Christine has a somewhat unique perspective on safety culture. Not only has she been responsible for operations and field work, she's also been responsible for ensuring compliance with ESH&Q regulations. Her PhD in mathematics, 3 decades of field experience, and her personal commitment to data-driven decision-making has informed and shaped her perspective to safety culture as a successful element to any successful enterprise. Currently, she is the president and co-founder of Lemma Technical Services, which provides senior consultative services and field personnel to environmental safety, quality, and radiological safety support to Department of Energy and Department of Defense projects. She has also worked as a senior executive on nuclear projects in the United States and the United Kingdom. Prior to forming her own company, she led large technical organizations with diverse and sometimes competing agendas. Examples, and I'm chuckling because how true is this? Examples include engineering groups, ES&H compliance division, and closure programs. Her earlier career included developing and leading various initiatives to change regulatory interfaces to be constructive and enabling rather than confrontational and disabling. From this diverse background, she has drawn many observations on what does, and more importantly, does not work to develop and foster a robust and healthy safety and culture in any environment. And this is something everybody I know wants to hear more about and learn. Dr. Christine Lee, it is such a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for inviting me. It's always good to see you.
Ditto. And just that last piece about just figuring what can really work for a safety culture, because you and I've talked before, a lot of people, in my humble opinion, they throw that phrase around and they kind of think it's about, well, okay, how many people got hurt this week? Okay, that's not really close to what we're talking. It's the whole philosophy that surrounds it. So, and we've talked about some ideas what we could discuss today. So from your perspective, because obviously this isn't your first rodeo looking at this really broad perspective of safety culture, what do you think is a critical skill that any business leader needs to ensure that they can have a positive safety culture?
So let's be clear that what we're talking about in this particular question is a business leader. What's a skill a business leader needs? I imagine that some of the members or some of your audience are more like practitioners, but this question is specifically about the business leaders. And for me, there's only one critical skill they need to know, and that is to know their own value proposition. One of those value propositions will be, and in fact must be, financial profit. If it's not financial profit, you're not going to be in the position you're in. So every business leader has at least that one critical core value proposition. In fact, it underpins almost every business decision that's made in America. The real question, though, is that business leader needs to ask themselves honestly if they have any other core value propositions. And
Well
given our current social evolution, where we are as a nation and culturally, it's not unlikely that that is their only value proposition. And that's not an editorial or a critique. That's just an honest, what I see is that has become the single value proposition underpinning most of the behaviors that we see in America at the moment. And that of course expands into your safety culture. If your core value proposition is profit, that will drive and underpin everything in your business.
It's a great comment because there has to be some financial considerations on any company's performance. It's, when you hear like quality first, safety first, human resource first, there's going to be this balance, and you're right, there still has to be some financial perspective of it for the company to be able to succeed as a whole. Right on target. So, and this is, and again, I grin talking with Christine because anytime I get near her, you really make my brain hurt in a good way. That is because I really like the perspective you bring us because you have all this background with it. So can you talk a little bit about how the perspectives and the culture of that organization, they kind of take on the flavor, for lack of a better phrase, of the leadership team. Is that a good way to put it?
I think that's a fair way to put it, Mike.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, my observation, my entire experience is, regardless of what anybody likes to say and however anybody wants to play with numbers and statistics, at the end of the day, the safety culture of any organization reflects the core value proposition of the leadership. It's so if the leadership has, consider that there are probably two primary value propositions. One is profit. Okay, we see that reflected in all of our lives every day about money. And I don't put it in terms of money, I put it in terms of profit, because it is about profit. And if you think of where does the profit accrue, it accrues upwards. It doesn't accrue downwards to the workers. It accrues upwards to stakeholder, shareholder. And the other value proposition that I look for is worker well-being. So what I've seen is that in any organization where the leadership embraces two core values, profit plus worker well-being, there is a natural growth of a robust and healthy safety culture. And one aspect of that I think is worth noting is leadership isn't necessarily only centered in the executive management team.
Very good.
There are leaders, clearly at the end of the day, they own. In fact, the top person in the organization ultimately owns the safety culture because it is a direct reflection of that individual.
Yes.
If you don't like the safety culture, look at the guy or the girl at the top. More war story?
Absolutely. We love war stories.
Okay, so I have observed some interesting leadership styles. And I have observed an executive, I don't want to give too much detail because I don't want somebody to try to second guess who I might be talking about. That's not fair. But I have seen a specific executive leading different organizations under different corporate regimes. Under one corporate regime, the corporation, the parent, if you will, had a very, very strong core value of worker well-being. And this executive embraced it because we normally embrace the values of our bosses, of our corporate bosses. He embraced that, and it aligned with his personal sensibility, and it was a joy to work with that project. They had a robust safety culture, and that brought with it minimal disruptions from safety issues, from non-compliances. And without a doubt, this individual experienced plenty of pressure from the back office to increase profit, because that's their job. At the end of the day, that's their job. There was a happy workplace, and everything worked really quite nicely. Under the second organization, however, there had been a change. The corporate structure behind this manager had a single core value. Their value proposition was profit. And of course, the profit Profit always directs upwards. It does not ever direct downwards. So the profit was going upwards. And that was the focus. So the focus was on efficiency, which is a euphemism for get me more money out of every dollar I spend. It was about do it faster, do it cheaper. It was all of those things, all of which are intended to maximize profit, which again directs upwards. So the safety culture was weak. People understood that they did not really have, there was no value proposition that said that worker well-being was useful or important or a value. It was simply profit. The manager did the best that he could under the circumstances, but his responsibility is to keep his bosses happy, and he was not real successful at trying to incorporate both. The net result is that safety issues abounded, non-compliances abounded, the culture was weak. There were endless problems with it. The kind of a corollary along those lines is I encountered the same executive on a different project, and unlike the project where he was working with a corporate structure that embraced two core values, and at that place, all of the profit goals were ultimately met because the work was performed with minimal disruption. From rocky safety cultures give you a lot of disruption.
Yes.
If you have a happy workplace, then work tends to get done efficiently, well, compliantly, you have few problems, and maybe you don't get the last possible penny out of your dollar in profit, but you do get your profit goals. So that was the one. This other project that I encountered him on was caught in the most difficult position. The corporate core value was profit. The manager was trying very hard. Yes, he did intrinsically value the worker well-being, but he was undercut because there was another leadership center downstream from him that embraced the profit core value and undercut almost everything that he tried to do to maximize or implement or recognize that worker well-being is also an important and valuable value proposition. So the point is that leadership isn't necessarily centered in the executive office, although they own it. And sometimes all the best intentions and the best meaning of those leaders is undercut by not observing and managing that there are other leadership centers and not managing them. And talking too much, Mike, you have to stop me.
This is phenomenal because in essence what you're saying, there is a value proposition, there is a true benefit to the company to have a successful safety culture. Real quick, we're going to do a commercial. We got to pay the rent. We'll be right back. Don't leave. We're going to talk about metrics, all kinds of cool stuff. Stand by.
Safety Culture Strategies provides world-class safety culture and safety program management consultative services for clients throughout the United States. Whether your company is pursuing Voluntary Protection Program STAR designation, ISO 45001 certification, or considering a comprehensive review of your current safety programs and processes, Safety Culture Strategies brings hands-on experience combined with a unique perspective that readily translates from senior senior management to task-level personnel. This collective skill set provides you with a very insightful health check of your overall safety management system that can also assist with reducing injuries and attrition, as well as increasing profitability. Safety Culture Strategies is also certified to provide Ziegler Institute employee engagement training and leadership coaching. When combined with established relationships with federal and state regulators, Safety Culture Strategies is uniquely positioned to assist the safety culture efforts of any company. For additional information, visit www.scstrat.com or call us at 702-780-1410. After all, every company has a safety culture, but is it the culture you want?
And we're back with Christine Lee, President of Lemma Technical Services. A lot of discussion today, and it's great to have her with us because she's been there, boots on the ground, rode this more than once to figure out what works and doesn't work. And with this been great discussion. And one thing I want to get in front of you, because I know we're going to have a lot of fun with it, and it's going to sound odd, because I really, really enjoy finding value-added or good metrics versus the ones that I just, okay, you count how many times you issued a Band-Aid. Okay, that's number one, that's lagging. And that, to me, that's just a number in of itself. So metrics and statistics, they can be viewed as just an end up to themselves. I did it, I don't have to worry about it anymore until the next month, and I put it back on the bulletin board. But I believe with your insight and expertise, you found out how they can truly support any organization that wants to enhance their safety culture.
I believe so. And part of that discussion sometimes about leading lagging indicators, we forget that indicators are just that. They're indicators.
Yeah.
All they can do is indicate you're getting better or getting worse. Indicators in and of themselves are not a goal. And it's distressing when I see safety programs of any sort that put all their effort into charts and displays and numbers and, well, we had 10 of these this month and 5 of those, and they forget it's not the metric, it's the meaning. And that makes it much more difficult because there's no rule of thumb. There's no easy answer. The reason nobody has come up with the perfect set of leading indicators is it doesn't exist. There's no such thing. There are simply many, many workplaces. It comes down to culture, and that comes down to leadership. And I sound like a broken record, and I apologize deeply, humbly, for sounding like a broken record, but it's a fact. If you have leadership that embraces the value of worker well-being, core value, as a value proposition, then almost any safety culture program that you implement will enhance your safety culture. If your leadership embraces a single and only profit margin, profit value proposition, no program will ever result in a healthy safety culture. And that's the hard thing. So as you talk, Mike, with some really good ideas there on metrics, understanding what your management and organizational core value propositions are really informs and changes what your metrics will be. I'm assuming that the majority of your viewers are deeply invested in safety culture improvement. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing this. And I know that's where your heart lies, Mike.
You betcha.
So to help those people think about what kinds of metrics should we use, consider, understand what value propositions are in your particular enterprise. And you won't get that by asking the person, because most of us don't know, because most of us don't think about it. It's just not a thought, right? How often, Mike, have you been asked, what are your value propositions?
Not too often, to be candid.
Not too often. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, in all honesty, it's only been the past few months, as I've contemplated some of the changes happening in our country right now, that I have myself come to understand how much simpler this whole safety culture, from a holistic perspective, how much simpler it is than you and I have ever thought in our careers. It really comes down to something as simple as Infosys and our Mariana Murphy, one of the co-founders of Infosys, founded this gigantic, enormous global company in 1981. It's a model in the world. He gives interviews and all kinds of things at eminent MBA programs and all kinds of sessions like that. This is a really highly respected man. You can boil down his philosophy from 1981, from when they started the company, into 3 simple sentences, and he has done this. Do the right thing. Do it well. All else follows.
Really?
Really.
Wow.
Go look him up. Your viewers can go look him up. He's easy enough to find, and he still does interviews. He still does YouTubes and podcasts, and he's still engaged. He must be 170 years old. He made this company in 1981.
Oh my
So he's
goodness.
got to be 170 by now.
Yeah. Well, it's,
Nevertheless,
and I find it fascinating when you're saying, do the right thing and do it well. Those two at times can almost be polar opposites to each other, because there's some of the other pressures around that leadership team. But in listening to you and learning from you, that's part of just how, with the help like by your organizations, the leadership team gets educated on this, so those type of commitments don't get overshadowed by the new concern from the board of directors or somebody from the client or a state regulator, and they're saying, well, what happened to our great safety culture program?
what happened to our great safety culture program is, you said you wanted a 20% cut in expenses, and because you wanted a 20% increase in profit, and so we gave you that. It
Yes.
came with a cost. The cost is the well-being of the workforce, and we basically told them that they weren't as valuable as profit. Your profit.
And
They know
ironically,
it's your.
right, and you're right on target. A lot of times they don't even appreciate that's how it comes across. They just think they're saying they're. So on metrics, because I was so excited we had this topic with you today, without, naturally you don't want to name names. Have you got a couple of your war stories on metrics that have really been successful and they took the right trajectory for the company versus ones maybe not so much being successful?
Okay. A project I participated, they were having serious safety culture problems. They had a string of significant safety injuries. They had a string of radiological contaminations. They had a string of non-compliances that cost money. They were on the verge of contractual issues with their customer. And the request was, Christine, see what you can do. We need to figure out what's going on and fix the safety culture. Right?
Yep.
Because obviously the safety culture, in so many people's view, is a standalone thing that you just have to massage it and pat it on its head and tickle its belly and it'll get better. We put a lot of work into this. It turned out that this organization had, for several previous years, that used the INPO safety culture survey, and they gathered up data, but the data had never been distributed, neither to management nor to the workers. So nobody knew the data. It was just the person who gathered it did a thing and then said, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Okay. So we took the same survey. I don't see a point in reinventing wheels if we still got it round and it still goes, and I just, all right, that's the wheel, it'll work. We took the wheel We sent it out to everybody. We got the results back. We made sure it was going to be anonymous responses, and I'm the one who looked at everything to make sure that it stayed anonymous. We also they had a series of worker-led safety teams, as many companies do.
Mm-hmm.
I took those little safety teams and we put together a list of questions, for interviewing workers, and gave them some, fairly straightforward, here's how you do an interview, and just sent them off to interview the workforce and got all that information back. They sat down with the same group of people who they're on safety teams, so they care. They have this heart thing about safety.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't volunteer. We sat down as a group and we looked at all these numbers, and I did all the crunching of the numbers and that kind of thing because I'm a math geek and it's my thing. So it's joy. So I put all of these numbers and stuff and compiled and looked at all of it, and we spent quite a bit of time, and I applaud the leader, the executive of this project, for insisting to his direct reports that they would free up these people to spend time.
Good.
So I applaud him for that. We discovered several core problems. One of them was actually in the leadership team, and it was some of the behaviors by some of the leadership team members. And those were turned over to the executive to deal with. And then we identified collectively some worker issues, and let the little safety work teams, we let them devise the improvements and the corrective actions that they thought would be appropriate and to lead them. And we kept them to just a couple at a time because it's an elephant. You can only eat so many bites at once.
Yes.
Okay, so all in all, we did this every year now for 3 or 4 years, and we tracked. And it was a really dorky survey, but so what? You could see what was going up, you could see what was going down. We looked at the numbers. All in all, worker engagement improved. The sort of feel of the enterprise improved, and people felt empowered. Mm-hmm. That was a positive. And the metrics themselves, they fell out of the analysis that we did of the data that we got.
Excellent.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll say, so essentially, through this process, they found which metrics were really providing some value to them because now they were relevant.
Yes.
Perfect.
They also found they focused their metrics on their problem areas. Good. By identifying the problem areas, and then they developed. I mean, you and I both know there are hundreds of available metrics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
That's the problem. Yeah. Or it's an opportunity.
Just real quick, if you would, if you got an example of maybe kind of a short version of a less than ideal one, and then we're going to do a little bit of summary before we get to the end of the show, because our half hour is almost over. I knew it was going to be fun with you. So if you got a soundbite on one that didn't work as well.
Okay, one that didn't work as well. Measuring the number of Band-Aids that were issued. You said that, and it struck me. Yeah, I've actually seen that one. So what happened? Somebody thought it would be a brilliant idea to keep track of how many injuries by how many Band-Aids were issued, so people just started bringing their own Band-Aids because they were punished if they used Band-Aids.
Exactly correct. And you and I have talked about Deepwater Horizon, the drilling platform, the disaster, and ironically, the day of it, they went out to reward them on use of handrails and putting a lid on the coffee cup, kind of overlooking some of the big ones. Christine, I can't thank you enough for being with. I was so thrilled to be able to get you on board because you bring this philosophical approach, but you share in a way that to me is readily implementable by any organization that chooses to care and they want to have a little focus on. So some of our takeaways for our viewers today: figure out what your core values truly are. What is that preposition? You probably just have a few of them. And somewhere in there, you got to have some financial considerations. And those in turn, those influence a safety culture. So if you're kind of seeing where they're going, we'll talk to your leadership, right? And you got to look at when you view metrics, you have to take the time to understand what they really mean. Otherwise, you have metrics for metrics safe, and I really like the discussion on worker well-being. I'm old school. If you take care of your people, they're going to take care of you. And Christine, we can't thank you enough for being on the show. This concludes our episode of Safety Culture Solutions. I want to thank Dr. Christine Lee again for bringing this whole perspective, especially on metrics. Yes, I love getting excited about metrics and just how it looks at from an organization. Please help increase awareness of our podcast by subscribing to the click, like, and share buttons. Also encourage you to send us any questions you may have, topics you'd like to see addressed in future podcasts, maybe more metrics discussion, requests for featured guests, or other items of interest. These podcasts will also be found on the Safety Culture Strategies website, www.scstrat.com. In closing, I want to share the following quote from Amelia Earhart because I think it's very relevant today. The most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is mere tenacity. Until next time, wishing you all the best with your safety culture journey. Bye-bye for now.